Hi, everyone. This is Johnny Alexander, and I'm back with another wonderful inspirational author here on Novelists Unwind. My guest today is An Gabhart, who is joining us from the rural country of Kentucky. And we do want to say up front that Anne has satellite internet, and so there sometimes is a bit of delay. So we just ask that you bear with us as we talk about her newest book and about her writing adventures. Anne, thank you so much for being with me. I'm so glad to have you back as a guest.
Oh, it's always fun to visit and talk about books. Thank you.
It is. And we're going to talk about your newest book, An Appalachian Summer. Now, did I say that correctly?
It is Appalachian.
Appalachian.
Some people, some people say Appalachian, but it's supposed to be Appalachian.
Yes. I had Cindy Sproul on as a guest a couple weeks ago, or probably a couple months ago now, and she was giving me a lesson. After we got done recording, she gave me a lesson on pronouncing Appalachian because I say it Appalachian most of the time. So, but anyway, we're here to talk about this wonderful, wonderful book, and Appalachian Summer, and the story behind this story. It was fascinating to me reading about the frontier nursing service and what they provided to the people in the mountains. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this story and about your heroine Piper and her motivation for volunteering to take on this task of being a courier in the mountains with the nurses.
Well, that's interesting. I'll try to remember all those
I,
questions.
I put a lot in one.
But I did, a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called These Healing Hills that has frontier nursing service history in it. In that book, my heroine is a nurse midwife. So I approached the history in a little bit different way for the new book, An Appalachian Summer. But most of my books are set in Kentucky. My historical books are nearly always have some connection to historical history here in Kentucky. I am a Kentuckian, and so I think it's easier for me to write about Kentucky because I know about the weather and the people and so forth. So when I'm researching for a new idea, I usually explore in Kentucky history. So I came across the information about the Frontier Nursing Service established by Mary Breckinridge in 1929. Mary Breckinridge had a passion or a real desire to help mothers and children, and especially those in poverty situations that did not have access to proper medical care. So she decided to establish a midwifery uh, service in the hills of eastern Kentucky, where mostly they had always depended on granny midwives or people in the neighborhood to help them have babies. Well, Mary came in with her midwives that she imported from England because there weren't any midwifery schools in America at that time. So she got some English midwives to come to the Appalachian Mountains and go into the homes of these people and give them prenatal care and then help them have their babies. And then they also followed up with the babies after they were born.
Wow.
Well, when the war broke out, she had to start a midwifery school in Hyden, Kentucky, because the English midwives felt they should go home and help their country during the war. So she started having American midwives at that time. So also, in order to free up the midwives to have more time to work with their patients, she would bring in volunteers, young women, usually from socially prominent families, to come and maybe spend a month, maybe 6 weeks. Some of them stayed longer than that. And they ran errands. They took visitors around because Mary Breckinridge was always raising money to try to support her services there. So she would she would host people that had the ability to contribute to her services, like actually Mrs. Ford of the Ford Company was one of her big sponsors, and so she had a lot of important guests. The couriers would take these around. They also delivered messages. They would take medicine out to the different clinics that were spread about in the area. Uh, they cleaned they cleaned out stalls, took care of the horses. When they were sick, they nursed the horses back to life. They just did all kinds of things that you wouldn't think that these young women might really want to do. But it
Right.
was such a life affirming experience for them that most of them, as soon as they got left and got married and had their own daughters, by this time, the idea of being a courier was so popular, there was a waiting list. So some of these former couriers would sign their baby daughters up on this waiting list as soon as they were born, just so they would be able to have the same amazing experience.
That
Well,
is.
Piper was a debutante, and she wanted to do something to make a difference. And so when she heard Mary Breckinridge speak at a tea, which Mary Breckinridge often did to raise money, she never asked for money. She just talked about her frontier nurses, and people would then contribute to her service. So Piper heard her speak, and she thought, that's something I could do. I can ride horses, and I want to do something different. And so she wasn't real happy with what her dad wanted her to do right then, so she took off for the mountains to be a courier with the Frontier Nursing Service.
And it's interesting to me too that you decided to set this when you did. I mean, of course, this is when it happened, so that does limit you some. But that you set it in the years after the Great Depression, where families were still being very affected by that. The story opens in May 1933, so it's only been what, about 3.5 years since Black Friday. Tell us about how that influences Piper's decision to not just spend her summer going to parties and being the debutante, but actually volunteering for something very different than what she'd ever been used to.
Well, it was a time of struggle for many people. Some people that Piper had known had lost all their money and were no longer in the social circle that she was in. And of course, Jamie, one of the characters in the book, is in that situation where his family lost all their money and were unable to continue to lead the same kind of lifestyle. I just wanted to show the difference, I think, between the debutante life and the life that was in the mountains, and also show the damage of the Depression era. The Depression wasn't over by a long shot because people were in a depressed state for many years before the economy didn't actually really get revved up again until the war started. Of course, the government started all kinds of programs to put people back to work, and did help a lot of people able to survive. That I just thought that would be an interesting time to write about, and
It
it
is.
suited the debutante plus the other.
It,
So that was probably the reason I chose that time. My other book about the Frontier Nursing Service, These Healing Hills, is set right after World War II. So
oh,
even though they have the same history, they are not sequels. They're
okay.
just similar background history.
That's interesting though. So at that time, I mean, then the Frontier Nursing Service would have been what, 15, 20 years old at least, if you're going from 1933 to after the war, maybe about 10 years, 10 years later, 15 years later. Yeah.
The Frontier Nursing Service is still going on. It's now the Frontier Nursing University. You can check online, and people are still being educated to be midwives and nurse practitioners and physician assistants. They are sometimes encouraged to try to go into the poorer neighborhoods where there isn't as much medical care. So it is still going on all these years later. Mary Breckinridge died sometimes in the 60s. And Wendover is a National Historic Site, which was the Mary Breckinridge's home and also the Center for the Frontier Nursing Service. It is now a bed and breakfast.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure that they're open right now, but it's a place you can go and spend the night and see a lot of history about the frontier nurses.
That would
And
be,
also, I think they have meeting centers.
wow. Wow. Yeah, that would be great to be able to go there and to actually stay in what was her headquarters and just be soaking up that history. So what's next for you? You're sort of staying in that era from what I understand, from what I read.
Actually, I did go back to the mountains for a new story. It is now with my editor. We'll have to see what she thinks about it, I guess. It's got not a title. It's called Along a Storied Trail.
Oh,
And we're leaving the frontier nursing history, but we're staying in the Depression era.
cool.
And it is going to be about a pack horse librarian. That was a program started up by the government to carry books up to people in those cabins on horseback.
Love it. I love pack horse librarian. I think that is just so cool. I wanted to talk a little bit too though, about your personal life, not to delve too far into that, but I love that you live only a mile from where you were born and that you have attended the same church for almost all your life since I think you were 17 years old, and that you're just so rooted in this community, because I'm someone who has lived like in several different states, you know, and I'm, like I said, I'm getting ready to move again, and I will have moved by the time this airs. Actually, I'll be somewhere else. So just I don't even know what I want to ask, but it's just like I just love the sense of history and the sense of place that you bring to your stories, because you are so rooted in where you live. Can you just talk about that, I guess, a little bit about just being so
Well,
love it.
I am a farm girl. I grew up on a farm out in the country. You know, my dad was a tobacco farmer, beef cattle. We didn't do milk cows. My mom at one time did some milking, but we never were a big dairy operation. Um, you know, I tell my husband that my roots go to China. We just can't move. And he'll talk about this place or that place. Of course, he was rooted here in Anderson County, where I live too. He grew up in Anderson County, also a farmer's son, and so you know, we have a lot of similarities there. You know, I just love the place here in Kentucky. I love the area. My family's here. Well, my kids moved off, but I don't know what I did wrong there. But one child is still in the area, and the others are in driving distance, so I'm okay. So they're all. It's one time I talked to a missionary lady, and I was saying that my kids were moved off too far for me to see them all the time, and she said, "Well, at least they're on the same continent," because she had children in Brazil. And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll back off now. I'm happy I'm in the same continent." But I've just always been sort of a homebody and enjoyed being on my farm, walking with my dogs, and you know, my mom had her first. I'm the third daughter, so she had her first child at home, and then she went to the hospital to have the second daughter. But she didn't like the hospital experience, so she had me at home then after that too. So I live close to where I grew up, and when I was a little girl, at a very young age, I got the writing bug, and it was just really a big dream for such a little country girl as me. But now here I am living this dream by writing books for readers that like Christian fiction.
Yes, yes. Over 30 novels from what I understand, and several of them have won different awards or been finalists for awards. And so just congratulations on all your success.
Well, the biggest award a writer can get is a reader that really loves your book.
True.
And, you know, the other awards are nice, but readers, when they get something special from reading your book, that's the best prize a writer can get, I think.
I agree. Absolutely.
Do enjoy writing. I enjoy sharing stories. Of course, there's always times while you're writing that book that you don't really enjoy writing that much because things get a little hard. But
True.
at the end, when you write the end, it's good.
That's always a good place to be. I know I'm kind of struggling with a manuscript right now, and it's like, oh, we're going to get through it. I know we're going to get through it. I want to show your book one more time, An Appalachian Summer. Beautiful, beautiful cover and a wonderful story. Really, really enjoy reading it. And one last question I always ask is when you do hit the end, so I'm glad you talked about that, when you do hit the end of the novel, type those beautiful 2 words, what do you do to unwind?
Well, of course, typing the end really isn't the end. At that point, I have to go back and do a lot of editing.
Yes.
But right now, I just sent in the manuscript. I guess last week sometime, and so usually what I like to do is what I would like to do is just sit down and read for a week.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, I have lots of tasks that I put off while I was doing the deadline rush. So right now, I'm trying to sort of catch up on some internet stuff and actually, I'm playing with the idea of narrating some of my books that were not in audio, and I'm hoping that I can narrate them myself. And it's a big learning curve. I don't know whether I'm going to get it done or not, but I'm working on it. But if you are interested in the book, of course, you can always find it on the internet. A lot of the internet book sites are at Baker Book House, or you can check out the Revell website, bakerpublishingcompany.com. It's always a great place to find good books.
That's true. That's true. I'm very thankful for all the Revell authors that I get to interview because their stories are so wonderful. So, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Johnny. I had fun talking to you about my book.
Me too. So thank you everybody too for watching. We're always glad to have you here on Novelists Unwind. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.